I was trying to save the world. I was trying to, make all this money, do all this stuff to go out and proselytize and tell everybody how they needed to behave. I've really come to terms with how important it is that I take personal responsibility for myself and I take ownership of how I am.
I want you to imagine a scenario in which suddenly all of your fantasies come true. You awake as this young man to discover that you're being massively rewarded for living a life of just extraordinary overindulgence. Well, if you're lucky, you also awake on a later date to realize that this life, your life, a life so many aspire to, a life of sex and drugs and rock and roll and wealth and fame, a life you are absolutely convinced would make you happy, instead leaves you empty, but also motivated to evolve, to embark on a sort of Viktor Frankl-esque search for meaning that ultimately provokes a spiritual awakening and a path towards purpose, greater self-actualization, and ultimately service. This is a story that has recurred on this show in many forms, but today's version of that story comes in the shape of Adrian Grenier. You know Adrian as an actor. He's appeared in a multitude of films and television projects, but of course, most well known for his portrayal of Vinny Chase in Entourage, which was this dizzying and quite meta experience that came to parallel his own life. But Adrian has now evolved past this archetype of adolescent id, trading Hollywood for a ranch outside Austin, maturing into a regenerative farmer, an environmentalist, an impact investor, and a man who cares deeply about our symbiosis with self, with each other, and the natural habitat we share. Today, he shares his story, and it's a good one, so please hit that subscribe button and enjoy my conversation with Adrian Grenier. Well, first of all, happy birthday, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you inviting me to your birthday party last night. I'm sorry I couldn't make it. I didn't get the email until too late, but...
Who emails birthday invitations?
I don't know.
We should have texted you.
It's cool, man. It's cool, man. But happy birthday.
Thank you.
How old are you now?
45.
45.
45, yeah.
You're a man.
Yes,
you're
officially.
in your middle age, officially.
Yeah.
How does it feel?
Good. I just grew up fast enough to squeeze in manhood, within the 45 years. Had I waited another year, I probably would have never grown up.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you've been on this crash course. You've compressed a lot into the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Which is what we're going to get into.
Yeah.
What's funny, well, thank you for making time to do this today. It's super nice to finally meet you. And what's funny about the fact that we're sitting here today is that we were first introduced, we talked about this on the phone the other day, I don't know if you recall, but we were first introduced by Mishka Shubaly back in December of 2015. And we had some back and forth on email.
Yeah, remember.
And that didn't seem to go anywhere. And then I feel like every year and a half or so, you'd resurface and we'd try to figure out how to sit together. And then we just couldn't sync it up. So you are officially the longest gestating podcast guest in the history. This has taken six years to make happen. But I've learned to not force these things. Like they're meant to happen when they're meant to happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like had we done this in 2016, it would be very different and far less. I don't think
meaningful. I had anything interesting to say back then.
Maybe a few things, but I feel like now you're in a position to talk about a lot of important, meaningful things.
Yeah. So back then, I had a lot more people between me and
Yeah, I gathered.
guys like
I gathered as much. There were a lot of gatekeepers.
a lot of gatekeepers. So a lot of the stuff didn't even get to me, and and I willfully remained ignorant because I didn't want to have to work too much. It's like if my people didn't call me and tell me I had to do something, all the better, because I could go to brunch.
Sure.
And then I went through a period where I just shed everything, and was doing nothing because I was basically in isolation. And now I'm finding a nice balance where I have some people that I work with, but I do most of the things myself. So I have actually some, I know what's happening in my life. Mm-hmm. I manage my own schedule. And so, we actually, I think, sort of mostly schedule this.
Yeah, it was just us.
In person.
Yeah, it was just us. But I feel like when you're in that position and you're on a television show, I mean, on some level, you need those people. The incoming has to be just completely dizzying. So there's no way that you'd be able to manage it on your own.
Oh, yeah. You become a big machine. If you're successful, you become a lot of moving parts, and you become like sort of the Millennium Falcon or something.
Right. But now you're living on a farm outside Austin.
Yeah.
Is it in Bastrop?
Outside of Austin.
Yeah. So you're like Ryan Holiday's neighbor now.
I am. Yeah, I was texting with him yesterday, in fact.
Are you
yeah.
really? So that's hilarious. That's so interesting. How does it feel like there's this sense that there's this great migration to Austin right now? Do you feel that? Is that real, or is that just like a handful of influencers move there? So it feels like more people than it actually is.
No, the inundation is real. I mean, it's palpable. You feel it for sure. And already before the pandemic, there was, an inordinate amount of people moving there every day. Uh-huh. And then the pandemic hit, and then a lot of people, and then all the influencers and all the people you recognize.
Right. And then I'm sure like a second wave of people that want to be around those people.
Yes.
Right.
And honestly, I'm concerned. I'm concerned because, Austin's slogan is "Keep Austin Weird," but there are a lot of people that just aren't that weird. They're just, kind of typical, and they're coming in, and they're not passing through that rite of passage to keep Austin weird, meaning being a part of like that culture, which is unique to Austin.
Yeah, but not too many of those people are going to be buying ranches or farms and growing their own food, unless they do fit that bill. Yeah,
well, they're in Austin. I skip town almost.
Right. Yeah, you're not even in outside the mix of that anyway.
Exactly.
Well, I'm really interested in this arc that you've been on, which kind of parallels this Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning kind of hero's journey. I think it's fascinating. It's a recurring theme on this show, but it's really my favorite kind of landscape to mine, this exploration of how you go from achieving your wildest fantasies as a young person and living this overindulgent lifestyle only to wake up one day and discover it ain't all that.
Yeah.
So why don't we go back to the genesis of that?
Okay.
I rewatched Teenage Paparazzo the other day, and I also I had never seen the documentary that you made about reconnecting with your dad, A Shot in the Dark. And I found it super interesting. I mean, I think Teenage Paparazzo feels almost quaint compared to what's going on right now. Everybody with their flip phones. And although Facebook existed, social media wasn't what it is today. And so it was sort of cute compared to what it must be like now.
Yeah.
Had you been living kind of the life that you were living in this particular moment?
It was totally simpler times.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. It was like celebrities were celebrities, and they were chased by the paparazzi, and the paparazzi were just trying to make a buck, and they were tabloids, and now it's just far more complex.
Right.
Yeah.
The Teenage Paparazzo movie, for people who haven't seen it, you connect with this young kid who's out there shooting pictures of celebrities. He's like 13 or something like that. And he goes on his own kind of exploration of fame as his notoriety increases, in no small part because of your interest in him. He's got to be like 25 now, though, right? Have you stayed in touch with him?
Yeah. The last time I ran into him was at some LA party. But no, we don't talk much.
No. Is he still doing that?
I think he's transitioned into more photography. I mean, he's a talented kid, so I don't know exactly, to be honest, but I've seen his Instagram and a lot of photographs and pretty pictures.
Interesting. In the documentary about your dad, you get a glimpse of what your mom is like, the era in which she grew up, the circumstances under which you were born. And looking at your life now, it feels like you've become your mom's son. Like she's this hippie, into all this spiritual, mystical stuff, which is kind of much more in your wheelhouse now.
Well, I finally stopped rebelling and, decided to just embrace my nature. Yeah, I suppose. Instead of rebelling against my mom and trying to be, not don't tell me what to do or who to be, I'll, decide myself. And I realized there's a lot of wisdom in what she was sharing with me and what she was offering once I decided to just stop being a rebel without a cause.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I owe so much to my mother and so much gratitude and appreciation for the way she shaped my thinking and my heart, mostly my heart, my spirit. I'm so grateful to have grown up in a home that was as loving and as supportive as I did. Even though I was a single mom and she was working really hard and often absent in many ways because she was, in the grind. Not to say she was an absent mom. She just was working so hard, I didn't get a lot of her attention.
Yeah, no, she was busting her ass for you. I mean, exactly. You get that in the movie. Like, this woman is incredible.
Yeah.
And the responsibility that she, decided to shoulder for herself to create this life for you.
Yeah.
Uprooting you from New Mexico and moving to New York City and just being on the hustle to, provide for you.
Yeah. And also now as an adult, finally, I'm able to recognize that my mom was operating within a larger culture in which men were mostly absent. Males were around, but like men who, like divine masculine men, embodied men who were showing up and providing that support system and playing a positive role in the family. It didn't exist. It didn't exist for her. It didn't exist for her mother. So, and I think in the movie she says, she had a, sort of a displaced sense of the role of a man. And so that pattern carried out in her while raising me, where she didn't really have any men to support her. So she took on that male role for me. And that's actually been quite an inspiration for me today now, is how can I now be the kind of man that would show up for my mother, for me as a kid, and of course now for my partner and my future children.
Yeah. And having to learn that without having a strong male figure in the household when you grew up. I mean, she says in the movie that after you reconnect with your dad and you have a few simple moments with him, that you have actually received more love than she received from her dad, even though her dad was in the house because he was so emotionally unavailable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And trying to, part of that movie, although, on the surface, it's kind of like this road trip to meet your dad. Beneath the surface, it's really this exploration on your part to try to understand what fatherhood is. And this all takes place like a couple of years before Entourage even happens, right? So you're grappling with this idea of what it means to be a man when you grew up without that presence in your life. So it's not like this idea of what does it mean to, stand tall and be, an emblematic, responsible, loving, compassionate provider. These are subjects that you've been thinking about for a long time. They've occupied a lot of space in your consciousness.
Absolutely. I mean, I believe that, we've come to this planet to wrestle with these themes of manhood, father, and all that stuff. And it just keeps repeating itself in different aspects of my life. And I mean, if I had to make that, I probably should remake that movie because it has so many holes in it. I was 20.
Yeah, you were so young.
I was 20.
Yeah.
I turned 21 while we were shooting that film. And I didn't know anything. So I was, it's a film from the perspective of a 21-year-old kid about what it means to be a man, or, what fatherhood is, having not had one, not grown up with one. I should probably do the
I think
sequel.
it would be cool because, it's this time capsule. Like, what is a mind at that age? Like, what is the preoccupation and what interests you and what problem are you trying to solve? But to figure that out, as a mature adult now with everything that you've, gone through and experienced and all the growth that you've experienced, I think you could create like a sequel to that could be powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's, what do we call it though?
I don't know. that title comes later.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it's strange because I'm practicing so much in just the being part and not the telling part. For a long time, I was spending a lot of time performing. Look at, I got it all figured out, and I have a lot to say, and now I'm much more interested in just head down, chop wood, carry water, and just be present and in my daily practice, really, of being that embodied man. And I haven't quite, as I said, I was in mostly isolation, and now I'm just coming out. It's like, how do I tell my story? Even this is awkward for me because I haven't had a lot of interviews over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
And especially to talk about something so personal. So I'm trying to find where that balance is between the beingness and then telling and communicating that to others.
And when that compulsion arises to express yourself or to tell a story or to tell people the way it is that coming from an egoistic place? Is that coming from an older version of you? Or is there something more pure, like in figuring out how to parse those two things?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got lost in the business of acting and filmmaking, where I was trying to climb that ladder and always maneuvering to put myself in a position where I could get that next role or make that next buck, so that I could always be expanding and growing, and lost track of the art of expression. And the reason why I initially was drawn to filmmaking was to, be vulnerable and share something of myself. Not entirely, but, more and more the money gigs started taking precedent over, the meaningful gigs. And
but
that's the nature of the business.
Yeah. I mean, it did start that way. You were kind of this, punk artist kid who was all about purity and integrity. You went to LaGuardia High, right? Which is like the fame school.
Yeah.
Did some acting there. Went to college for a stint, and kind of became an actor because you had a facility for it. But it was mostly a way to fund these other artistic endeavors and interests that you had.
I mean, in many ways, it was my ticket out of the hood. I was like living pretty, meager means. And I didn't want to have to, I wanted more. I wanted the financial security. I wanted, the cool parties and all that. So that was the easiest route for me. I had the talent, and I had people that were prompting me and, asking me to come audition and do stuff. So I had a lot of people that were wanting that of me.
But my sense was that you would take these roles to kind of pay the bills, but the heart was really somewhere else.
I tried to make that work. I tried to sit in sort of this artistic integrity while it's still like robbing, robbing Peter to pay Paul type thing. Like I'd go in, I'd make a couple bucks in Hollywood, and I'd come back and try and do real art,
right?
And spend all my money on.
You were in bands and you were making documentaries
exactly.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then Entourage, like everything goes out the window.
Yeah, I said robbing Peter to pay Paul, but I meant like Robin Hood. That's what I meant. That was the like the Robin Hood mentality.
I get these money from the fat cats, and I'll put it to a more
and in many ways, I'm still in that trip.
Aren't we all on some level?
Yeah.
I mean, this podcast is supported by sponsors, and I love my sponsors.
Yes.
But it's like we live in a commercial world, and to some extent, we have to play by those rules if we want to function and, share what we're here to share.
Yes. Well, we think so. We've been told that that's the only way that we can structure.
So help me
civilization.
Help me reimagine this.
Yeah. Well, what I've been doing now in my life is focusing on the role of money and investments and how we actually build a civilization that serves not only humans, but also the environment, sort of a more holistic approach to investing. So I started an impact investment company that has, a certain philosophy, a certain approach to investing that is novel. It's sort of, it works within a capitalist system, but it also seeks not just ROI, return on investment, but also YBM, what we call as yields beyond money. The things that are intangible, the things that are, perhaps create meaning in our lives, the things that are in harmony with and interconnected with our natural systems. And so that's really what I've been focusing on, because I do believe that our economic system is a story that we built and we told, and it's worked for us thus far, but if you look around, it's just not working the way we thought it would. And we need to, I think, reinvent how we exchange value with one another and what it is that we're focusing on creating. Because money, capitalism, incentivizes the creation of certain types of businesses and certain types of material things that are on many levels just not serving us anymore.
Yeah. Well, it promulgates a zero-sum perspective on everything, and it prioritizes, quarterly gains over the long-term interest of individuals and the planet.
That's right.
I mean, I could go on a long rant about that. And on some fundamental level, like from a Yuval Noah Harari perspective, like the entire structure, the system of money and commerce is built on a story, a social contract that is actually just illusion, right? We think of corporations as entities, but it's a couple pieces of paper and it's a collection of individuals and people. So how can we create a new story that's in better service to, all of our interests? And I think the cynical would say, well, look, you're still a venture capitalist, you're investing in these companies, you're operating within the system, and you can call it conscious capitalism or whatever you want, but are you not just doing the same thing? And how do you create a tangible metric around, yields beyond money?
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, right?
I judge whether or not we're on the right track based on the amount of resistance we get, and sort of calibrating the resistance.
You can't do that.
What?
Like, you can't do that.
Exactly. Like, oh, that's not possible. Or, I've been judging just the nervous systems of people that I've approached with this concept. And, a lot of these guys have a lot of money, enough to never worry again. And yet in those moments, you feel their heartbeat race a little bit and their breath speed up, because the idea that they would be investing in something that wasn't purely focused on ROI, although we do pretty well anyway, but really looking at the things that are intangible. And that's the scary part, is like the things, because we crave certainty. So we want to see the numbers and we want to have an investment that's going to guarantee a certain return so that we can have more dollars and cents in the bank, more zeros and ones, on the computer screen of our bank account, versus the things that are perhaps more more important are the things you can't calculate. They're just beyond the edges of our calculators. It's the human to human shared experience. It's how we, live in nature and connection and family and community and a state of being, health, wellness, mental health, sense of self, intelligence, like all these things you can't, calculate so easily. And so it's a little bit more challenging, but I do believe that we have a winning formula, if you want to get formulaic, to actually bridge that gap between making fine returns, ROI, and also putting an emphasis on the yields that are beyond money itself, because money in our current system is the focus, is the goal. When money in our minds is not a goal to accumulate more and more and more, it's the tool that we use to create the things that we want to see in the world,
or a byproduct of something mission-based.
And by the way, you know, one of my favorite ideas is you can't be rich unless your neighbors are rich, right? If you buy the nicest house, the biggest mansion, the most beautiful, pristine piece of property, and there are slums all around you, are you really wealthy? You're going to have to build higher walls. You're going to have to be more isolated. But if you distributed that wealth, or at least it was distributed naturally within a system to as many people, and everybody had a nice house, then you could walk down the block for miles, and there'll be, rolling fruit forests in people's yards, and people would be out playing, and it'd be a safe neighborhood. And that's wealth, right? You don't have to get locked up in your castle because you're afraid for your life, or you're afraid to leave. So I apply that same philosophy. Is it great to have a lot of money in your bank account? I don't know. I mean, it's just sitting there, right? What's really great is to have the richness of life that comes from spending your money in wise ways, so that the return is, more connection, more friends, more family, more health and wellness. Those things, experiences.
Yeah, I think that's a very powerful statement. And I think it's buttressed by the fact that you tried it the other way, right? Like, you're coming from a place of experience with this. It's one thing to say, academically, this may or may not be true, but you lived a life of, of indulgence, I guess would be a fair enough word to say it. I don't know how you would characterize it, but you kind of had all that. And deployed it in a self-serving way, as probably, most young people in their 20s would, only to discover that it left you feeling empty, and that the kind of sense of wealth being defined in a more broad context, brings your life meaning by deploying resources to the benefit of others. Yeah,
it's the zero-sum game versus the infinite game.
Right. The world is infinitely abundant, because the limited definition of wealth, when you spun your example of the mansion amidst the slums, as human beings, we're kind of predisposed to measure wealth only in comparison to others. So if you deploy that wealth and you're living in a robust community where everybody's needs are met, are you wealthy? Yes, in the broader definition. In the limited definition, you're not, because your house is the same size as everybody else, right?
Right. I mean, I'll make a celebrity analogy that I think that makes me laugh, because I've been there, I've experienced it. So I would often get paid stupid amounts of money to show up to a club. Okay, I'll tell you frankly, that's what would happen. They'd pay me a big check so that I would show up to their club, so that their club would look cool, or that they could say that I was there, and so it would bring up the cool factor of the club. I don't know why they hired me, but some people think I'm pretty cool. But anyway, they would basically, now I'm the product because they paid me, and they would place me in the VIP section with the velvet ropes and the bouncers, and I would be sitting there all by myself, alone, while everybody's out in the club dancing and having fun. And I'm like,
you're a zoo animal.
Exactly. A total zoo animal. I want to be out there like dancing, having fun with people. And so I would, I'd tell the bouncers like, I'm sitting there looking at their asses, right? Like I'm sitting there looking at these big bouncers' butts. And I'm like, guys, it's cool. You guys can go somewhere else. Remove the velvet ropes. Remove the velvet ropes, and then suddenly the commoners come in and start hanging out in the VIP section. And when you have people in the VIP section that aren't in isolation and aren't up on like a pedestal, suddenly the VIP section looks a lot like the rest of the club. And now it's...
You're happier, they're happier.
Right. But the club owners, they didn't get their money's worth, because now it's just another section with people having fun, as opposed to creating that mystique and creating the separation, which elevates me to this status where people can gawk and, like taking pictures of zebras behind in a zoo. The
counter narrative is that, look, if you come to this club, you actually might get to hang out with this guy as opposed to look at him past a rope. Wouldn't that be more alluring?
Yeah.
To their customers?
Well, once you start hanging out with me, it's not that special. So,
but they can take the pap shot.
A lot of these celebrities need the velvet rope, because when you break down the facade, it's like they're just people, right? It's like not that interesting. I'm a pretty good dancer, but other than that.
Yeah. Well, what's wild, and I know you've told this story a million times, but what's wild about the whole entourage thing is the meta nature of it all, because in so many ways it parallels this trajectory that you went on in your personal life, where the lines got incredibly blurred between the character you were portraying on television and the way you were acquitting yourself in your private life and kind of public life as you.
Yeah. I mean, the lines are so blurred, I can't even tell you what was what,
Right. Like when were you Vinny and when were you Adrian?
Well, so acting is really just tapping into the parts of yourself that are true and honest to a character that's not you, right? So just borrowing the piece, because we have all of it in us, and we choose to be, you choose to be rich at a certain age. You decided this is how I'm going to behave, and these are the patterns that I'm going to express as rich, and then me, Adrian, and but we have all of it. If you think about the time when you were in 8th grade and you were going to high school and you're like, oh, it's an opportunity for me to totally change my look, and no one's going to know, no one's going to call me out as being a fraud or inauthentic, because nobody knows me yet. So you can actually change yourself. So we have all of that within us. And in acting, that's what we do, right? We find the parts within ourselves that are the villain, could do what that villain does, or the parts within ourselves that are romantic, and we can play that romantic part. And at the end of the day, that's what was the question? I'm sorry.
I don't even know what the question was.
Oh,
the meta nature, the surrealistic nature of playing that character, and the way you were living.
Exactly. So when I got the role of Vince, I said no to that role.
Yeah, you were like doing a documentary in Mexico or something like that, right?
I was still attempting to maintain my creative integrity by doing a documentary about Cuban hip hop. I was sneaking into Cuba, and I had $1,000 to my name. I had a camera. I was going to make that film, and then I was like, you know what? I'll make money later, and in the meantime, I'll make a great film. And then I get this offer for this show called Entourage. I read the script and I'm like, this is the most superficial, these are not the kind of values that I want to promote. And I said no. And then they kept coming back to me, and I was like, I don't do TV. It's not TV, it's HBO. And no, I don't. I kept saying no, essentially. And then finally I came to terms with the fact that if I didn't say yes, eventually I was going to, Hollywood would turn its back on me entirely.
Your manager was going to fire you.
Right. Yeah. He's find a new manager. And so I did end up taking the role, and I would say that I had the hardest time out of all the cast, and they're all fine actors, but to play that part was so different than who I was at the time. And so it was not easy to become Vince. And the more I did it, the more praise I would get from the directors and producers and creators of the show. And then the show comes out, and then now the fans start giving me thumbs up. Then I would go out in the world, and people would expect, they wanted me to be the character because they're so familiar with it. So I'd walk into a room and I would get instant approval and then rewarded every time I showed up in the Vince milieu. So yeah, I started to indulge that for the sake of the fans, but also because I was parlaying that into other opportunities. And then suddenly the thing you're performing, the thing you're pretending becomes you.
Right.
When you do it enough.
Right. The lines get incredibly blurred. And I suspect the defense mechanisms come up, or the rationalizations like, well, yeah, but at some point I'm going to get back to the documentaries, or, what is the narrative that you're telling yourself to justify the behavior? Or does that just go out the window?
Well, yeah, look, I did make Teenage Paparazzo at the height of my celebrity. So I was still on some level maintaining my connection to art and remaining grounded on some level, which is, I think, what allowed me to come back to earth now. Because if I truly believed, you have to believe, you have to allow yourself to believe that you're somehow worthy of the attention and worthy. Otherwise, it feels so dissociative. Like you're just like, it's not.
But there's a lot of actors that don't feel worthy of that. And that's what really creates the psychological dilemma.
Yeah. No, it's a tricky thing because nobody really is better than anyone else, right? No one's somehow, and you have to make excuses for it. And over time, over history, it happens with, wealthy people, or people somehow convince themselves that they're better than other people. And it's because, if you're, royalty, it's because your blood is different and you're somehow special. And there's this rationalization that you somehow deserve all of the riches and the spoils of this thing. So you rationalize it so that you can keep having more of it and taking more and taking more. Because if you realize that, somehow there's something amiss, then you start coming down to earth and you have to start letting it all go.
Right. Yeah.
Which is really hard.
I mean, and you're in this for like a decade, right?
20 years.
So,
12, yeah.
The constant approval and the feeding of the ego, I mean, over that extended period of time has to really do a number on you.
Yeah. Well, and attention is, it's a drug of sorts. It's humans crave attention. It's like like a puppy. You can pet them and they'll like it, but humans need like that approval, that acknowledgement, that the attention itself. And in a media-based culture where all the attention goes to the few that get clicked on, the rest of us start to feel like, who's looking out for me? You break down the breakdown of communities and the family unit, and people are living in more isolation on their phones and in technology and in their little tiny one-bedroom apartments. So yeah, it's intoxicating to have all that attention. You want more of it.
Yeah, and yet, I mean, when I watched Teenage Paparazzo, you had a significant level of self-awareness around it to at least explore the meaning of it. Because the real narrative of that movie is exploring what fame is, what creates fame, and what does it all mean? Like going behind, the velvet rope of the media machine to see how, the sausage is made.
Yeah.
And when you kind of ingratiate yourself finally into the paparazzi community and they accept you, like you're not there to put them on blast or anything like that. I mean, it's pretty fascinating, that whole like kind of subculture and ecosystem.
Yeah, that was such a fun movie to make. It really was. I got to infiltrate the media machine from like the vantage of a celebrity. I had a lot of access that another filmmaker wouldn't have, and to be able to use my position and take advantage of what I had accomplished as an actor to make a film. Nobody else. The thing I'm proud of is nobody else could have made that film, because I don't think anybody else would have made that film.
Right.
If you're famous, you don't want to rock the boat. You want to just like, okay. In fact, a lot of the Entourage guys pulled me aside and they're like, "What are you doing with this film?" Because I was hanging out with Paris Hilton and like, glimpsing into like her experience from her perspective. And of course, when you hang out with Paris Hilton, all the gossip rags start, writing about it.
Right.
They don't know.
And you create your own. It's so easily manipulated when you're like, I'm going to go to Paris's house and we're going to walk out together and Austin's going to take our picture. And then 2 days later, it's going to be everywhere.
Yeah. And the opportunity to just indulge the meta-ness of that Hall of Mirrors, where it's, we're creating the stories, the paparazzi are taking the bait and they're using those stories to generate for their publications. And then now we're making a film about that. And then Austin, little paparazzi is becoming, he's
becoming famous in the making of that. Like the meta layers of it, like just continue to unfold.
Yeah. And now we are living in that exact meta reality, the fractured,
right.
Hall of Mirrors, that I think that movie sort of preempted. And you mentioned, we were early days. It was, Instagram didn't exist. It was
right. It was all about those magazines, and,
right.
And,
the internet was a new thing at the time.
Not nearly as relevant as they were then, but now the phone is 100-fold what those things kind of did to our brains.
Yeah, and there are all these people that have 41 million followers, and I'm like, who is that?
I've never heard of that person.
Exactly.
How could 41 million people know who this person is, and I've never heard of this person?
Exactly. And I think there was like maybe a 30-second little edited clip where we tip a hat to the coming technologies. It was like, because they were new, like Twitter.
Twitter and Facebook. Like just literally a 1 second mention.
That was it. And then
thing.
It was like, what's going to come next? All this. And so.
Yeah, it seems so innocent now comparatively, I suppose.
Totally.
But it's the same thing. It's just writ a little bit larger. But to be in the mix of all of that, for that long of a period of time and having to kind of be a part of that machine while trying to maintain some level of dignity and integrity, like while you're getting paid tons of money and, all the, experiences that come with that, being, what were you, like 27, 28 years old?
Yeah. I mean, that's when it really hit. Yeah, when it took off.
And so what was the interior experience of the young Adrian while you were in the midst of all of it?
Yeah, I fancied myself a spiritual person. I was a good person, but, in retrospect, I made a lot of compromises to my soul, my ethics, in order to keep climbing, keep getting to the next level. I often see, and I was doing environmental work, and I was starting.
That's always been a part of who you are.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's this temptation to look at that experience and say, you were off your path or you were on the wrong trajectory. And I think you were on the correct trajectory the entire, like that, those experiences needed to happen in order for you to become the person you are today. It's all fine.
Yeah.
It's all good. Like,
well, we want to be reductive. We want to like make it pat, you were on the wrong path. Now you're on the right path. It's, it's messy. Life is messy. And, I guess I like to think of it more as like not, binary, but more, embodied. Like, are you more connected with your true nature versus ignoring parts of yourself in order to have this little ride and, the illusion of self, like, oh, I'm this big Hollywood fancy guy, as opposed to what's really going on deep down inside and what's your purpose here on this planet to serve the world and to be, to be of service to your neighbors. That's
Right.
how I see it now.
Yeah, this was an experience that you had that was an expression of some aspect of who you are. It taught you a lot. You've learned lessons from it, and that's allowed you to mature and express yourself in a different
And more
way.
importantly, I survived it.
Yeah.
Because
A
some
lot of
people
people
aren't that
don't.
lucky. Yeah.
I know.
So I'm glad I survived it and came out the other side so that I could, bring the gold of that wisdom of the experience, and then now share it.
Right. So walk me through the process of kind of coming to terms with that experience and, wrestling with it, reckoning with it to kind of motivate you to find more meaning or go on this quest towards greater self-actualization.
Yeah. There's a predominant perspective, I think, in liberal culture that thinks that somehow we can save the world, that we can save the environment. The government's going to, pay for all these services that are going to help you out there. I really come to terms with how important it is that I take personal responsibility for myself and I take ownership of how I am and how I, show up. I think Krishnamurti said, it was like, we heal the world when there's a transformation of the individual. And that mentality really struck home for me because I was trying to save the world. I was trying to, make all this money, do all this stuff to go out and proselytize and tell everybody how they needed to behave in order to help the oceans or do this, that, and the other. And I really did believe that I was a good guy. I did all the right things. I'm making all this money, so obviously I'm doing something right. And then I started to chip away at that that belief system, and I started to look under the hood, and I realized there was so much that I was ignoring, and a lot of the things that I was doing where it was hurting other people or was at least ignoring their experience for my own sake, and I had to get clean and take responsibility for what I was actually doing and get, I guess, it's the awakening where you finally open your eyes and you realize what's actually happening as opposed to just what you believe, what you're projecting, what the fantasy of your life is. And so the first step was opening my eyes and seeing the harsh reality of what actually is, what is, not just what I'd been, indulging.
Yeah. There's this idea that, I guess what I want to say is the impact that you seek to have on the world is calibrated to the extent to which you are embodying that value system in your own self, right? We can say I'm trying to do this, that, and the other, but if you're living in a manner that's incongruent with that, or you have yet to reach a certain level of maturity where you're espousing those values, where you can actually walk the talk, you may have some success with that, but ultimately you're never going to achieve potential with that, and it will ring somewhat shallow.
Yes.
So that awakening piece, was there a specific moment or a bottom? I'm somebody who's been in recovery for a long time, so I tend to look at these things through that lens of, kind of 12-step vernacular. But that idea of, that low moment where it all comes crashing down, or was it a slow?
Yeah, I actually got into the 12-step, philosophy, I guess, which has been very helpful to me. I came to believe in God, through this process. I started opening myself up to, for so long I was so arrogant, and so in my head, and cynical and godless, and nihilistic, really, ultimately. So I started embracing some of these frameworks. 12 Steps is an incredible framework that has a lot of wisdom, a lot of, is very helpful. And I guess there was this gnawing sense of dread that something bad was going to happen to me, because things were just too good. You know, when you're high and like you're half asleep, things feel very cozy and comfy, but you're not able to actually see what's on the horizon. But I felt something, you know, and I didn't know what it was. And I was like, things can't be this good forever, right? Can they? You know, flying around the world, going to all the parties, making all the money, getting all the shows. And then rock bottom hit suddenly, and it was from like a totally unlikely place. I was dating somebody who basically, in no uncertain words, said, "You are a horrible human being, and you need to take a big look at yourself. I'm out," and dumped me. And I was so incensed, and it was incredulous. I was like, "You're going to dump me? Have you seen my house? You know, have you seen my status? Have you seen all the things that I've accomplished? You're going to leave me?" I couldn't believe it. And on the way out, she gave me a list of things to look at. And I took that list and I was like, "Listen, I love you. And I think you're out of your mind. This list is correct. Like, none of this is me. I'm fine with all this stuff. But because I love you and I respect you, I promise I will take a hard look at all this." So after she left, I sat down, I started looking at the list. And slowly but surely, I started to realize that she was right, and that one after the other were things that I had all but ignored.
So what was on the list? Come on.
Well, you know, your relationship to sex, your relationship to drugs and alcohol and escapism and indulgences, chasing shiny objects, selfishness, you know, and indulging in destructive patterns, that kind of stuff. And I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm fine. I got it all figured out. Everything's great. I'm a UN Environment Goodwill Ambassador, for Christ's sake." You know? It's like, come on.
As long as you have that, then it helps justify the other stuff. Meanwhile, you're having fun and your life is actually going well.
Yeah.
So it's hard to look at that.
And the confirmation bias. Like everybody in the world's telling me, keep going.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're on the right path. Keep making, you know, television shows.
I had this woman on the show yesterday named Anna Lemke, and she's a psychiatrist and runs the addiction medicine clinic at Stanford. She's got this new book out called Dopamine Nation that's about to come out. And what's interesting about her thesis in this book, she shows up in that documentary Social Dilemma, like the idea that we need to look at addiction more broadly, especially in this technological era where everything is impulsing us in an addictive way. But what I had never really kind of fully grasped until I read this book was this idea, and this will come back to you, that when we're in this relentless pursuit of pleasure, and you're somebody who is kind of living that at a higher level, that ultimately the pain that we've crafted our lives to so desperately avoid will slingshot back, you know, in great proportion to the extent to which we're trying to avoid it, right? So that, you know, relentless pursuit of being just ahead of the FOMO, you know, and chasing the party and doing all the things when you're in this perpetual state of dopamine inducement, you know, at a crazy level, is not only unsustainable, but is setting you up for this great fall.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
That's right.
We'll be back in a sec, but first, if you dig this podcast, and I hope you dig this podcast, then I think you'll really enjoy my latest book, Voicing Change, featuring excerpts from poignant essays by and glorious photography of some 50 of my favorite guests over the last 8+ years of doing this thing, this podcast. It's a gorgeous, artful compendium of the show and copious wisdom shared therein, all wrapped in a hardcover coffee table form that provides a great taste of what we do here at the RRP and serves as a beautiful keepsake or gift for the ardent fan. The book is only and exclusively available on our website. Signed copies are available, and we are shipping globally direct to any coffee table on planet Earth. So to learn more and snag your copy today, visit richroll.com/VC. That's richroll.com/VC. All right, let's get back into it. So boom, the woman leaves you.
Boom.
With the laundry list of character defects.
Yeah. And I started the long road of going into the pain, going into the suffering and all the things deep down inside that I'd been avoiding probably for 30 years since I was, 8 or younger. All that childhood trauma that I was masking or floating, just hovering just above. And it hurts. So of course you want to avoid it. Of course it makes sense. I was protecting myself from it. But now at this stage in my life, I was like, okay, let's look under the bed. Let's look in the closet. Let's see what boogeymans are there.
Right. And what was the process for doing that?
Well, first, it was just a long process of, first, like getting advice, asking for help, reading books, learning, finally reading that book, Iron John, that my mom gave me when I was, when I was younger, and
it's Robert Bly,
which I never read. I'm like, I don't need to be.
He's the OG in the whole kind of divine masculine space, right? Yeah. Like go out into the woods and bang on drums and stuff.
Connect with your beast, connect with the beast within you, become dangerous, and then transcend that, but use it for good, I guess. But become embodied and become all the range. To me, it's not about being good or bad. It's about coming to terms with in being in connection with all of the layers of your of your nature. Mm-hmm. But first I had to stop all the patterns, all the escape patterns. So I had to, I went celibate for some time. I stopped drinking. All the things that I would use, all the tools I would use to escape, all the dopamine fixes that I had laying around all over town.
Going on a dopamine fast of sorts. Yeah,
essentially.
I did a year of celibacy. I mean, it was the most instructive. Mm-hmm. In early sobriety, I did that, and it was so revelatory. And it just puts this mirror up, and you realize, at least in my case, like I realized how much of my behavior was oriented around gaining female approval and how fucked up my disposition was or my habits were around relating to the opposite sex.
100%. Yeah. I share that sentiment. Yeah. And, and all the things that come with it too, the pornography and the way it shapes your relationship to sex itself, and then the biggest thing that really helped me was recognizing that that I had a deep hurt because of what I'd been taught at a younger age about sex, and that was from disembodied men or men who were dysfunctional or destructive, toxic, if you will.
Meaning that you should just be in pursuit of it, or that it's a notch in your belt, or what do you mean
in the absence of having that divine masculine role model growing up, there were a number of men who would teach me how to womanize or how to lie or get away with things, indulge in in women as opposed to be in service of or respect of, our counterparts. And then men who were frankly inappropriate with me sexually, who, had, some pedophilia tendencies that, I was around when I was at a young age. And, there's this one guy who, used to tell me like dirty jokes when I was younger. And I thought it was funny, but I realized at an older age, like I excuse that kind of behavior because that's how I was trained, essentially. And I thought it was normal.
Yeah. And you were desperate for a male figure in your life, I imagine.
Of course, yeah.
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 Yeah. And that gets imprinted.
Yeah. Oh, and then of course, just not being there. My father just bounced when I was younger. So I learned that, how to escape, how to run.
Yeah.
How to not be there.
It was interesting in the documentary when you meet him, and he's so, the word passive is used, but he's so bereft of emotional tools to even know how to communicate properly. And you relate your own kind of passivity with his, but I just saw somebody who was extremely, just lacked any emotional aptitude whatsoever.
Yeah. So, sweet guy, but I think he sort of hides behind the sweetness. And he should read Iron John, because I believe there's a male frequency that is harsh, and if you don't connect with that, you let the world just throw you around,
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting moment right now in the conversation around masculinity. I feel like masculinity has been just lumped in with toxic masculinity as one thing. And I know, a big part of your journey and what you talk about is a reclaiming or a redefining of masculinity in a healthy context. You can call it divine masculinity or any number of things. But in this moment right now, there's this sense that we need to be embarrassed as men, or we're not allowed to be men, or it's unclear what the appropriate role is for a man because of the culture. So we should just sort of step back. And it's confusing as somebody who's a father also, like, what is the role? Like, okay, provider, protector, but I also need to be emotionally available. And I need to be strong, but I also need to be the guy who goes to every school event. And, it becomes like, it's much more complicated than it was in the era of, our parents or my parents who are a little bit older than yours, where it was a little bit more binary, and that had its problems, of course. But I find oftentimes like I can't do all of these things all of the time. Right?
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. I don't know if it has to be that hard though. If you're, the way I see it, heart-centered masculine energy leads, like your values and the direction that you're oriented to comes from, your ethics, your heart, your love for, your family, protecting the world, protecting people, doing the right thing. That's where your direction comes from. And then it's all the other parts of you as a man. I find like the beast in me that helps me go execute and go make it so. And to protect, yes, I have to learn to be dangerous. In fact, like when I wasn't in touch with my ability to be destructive, when I was almost, in many ways emasculated by a sort of a feminist ideology where no one, like culturally, no one wanted me to be dangerous, so they made me, they emasculated that part of me. And then I became more dangerous because all of that came out in shadow. And I started doing things that were subconsciously destructive. And I wasn't stepping into that beast part of me to actually protect and serve women and my community. And so I feel like you have to be in touch with that, but like be oriented from the heart space.
Yeah. As an actor, that's sort of traditionally conjured as a feminine expression, right? It's a more feminine energy. To be an artist, to be a musician, those things would be associated, at that end of the spectrum. On some level, I feel like the conversation around divine masculinity has an inherent femininity to it, because you're saying we need to learn how to connect with the heart, which is not traditionally a masculine attribute, right?
Well, we're both, right?
Of course, we're all we're an amalgam of these energies. So first, we have to recognize the inherent femininity within all of us as males.
Yeah. I think, maybe back in the day, things were more binary and simple, in which men attempted to be, so masculine that, it was just like undeniable that you were a man, right? You had to prove it so much that you lost touch of the subtlety and the dynamic within ourselves. But now I find myself to be really, even leveled, still very much in touch with my feminine. And yet I've started to cultivate and fashion the more edgier masculine parts of myself to really bring myself into balance.
And what does that look like? Like, how have you done that?
Well, I now live on a farm, so I have plenty of
hands are in the soil.
Hands in the soil, using my body and my hands and working my muscles and lifting heavy things and building things and wanting to protect my kingdom and setting it up so that there's a safe space for people to come and be, for my family to live in.
Yeah. So much of this, in addition to being, in this period of time where, so many young people grow up without dads, we're also in a culture in which we've been robbed of traditional rites of passage, that teach us how to become heart-centered men in so many ways. And as a result, it's no surprise that you see these movements out there of men congregating, trying to recapture some aspect of that or to create that for themselves later in life in their own lives. And I think that's also why you see all these, whether it's Spartan or like all these challenges or running a marathon, it's because
sports,
we don't have what we used to have as tribal cultures that would put us through the ringer and teach us what it means to do something hard and the confidence that comes with that and the kind of acceptance that you would receive within the tribal community for passing those, rights.
Yeah, absolutely. As our culture expands and becomes more spread out throughout the world, it's harder and harder to have those intimate rites of passage that are passed down. So, and we have these sort of, placeholder or these alternatives, which are
stand-ins.
Stand-ins for that, sports teams and, all that kind of stuff. I personally have been doing a lot of men's work, working with other men to bring each other through these rites of passage. And it's been so important, so helpful.
And what are those experiences like? Like therapeutic or more like tactile?
I mean,
experience-based?
Life-saving, just enriching, I feel so blessed to have the kinds of men that I do in my life, which I never had. I never had brothers. I never had those parental role models, male parental role models. But now I do through my brothers. And now I'm an adult, I'm a man, I now can start to work on being that role model for others, but to have other men to model things for me and to push against me and to hold me accountable. Iron sharpens iron. So there's a lot of, the masculine energy wants to have that pushback, and that the wrestling or the horseplay is so important. And then, the desire, the philosophical impetus to make the world a better place. I used to hang out with people who wasn't really interested in making the world a better place. They're just, where's the next fix, or, where's the next good time? A lot of Machiavellian, how can I get mine, and how can I exploit the situation to make more money or get more fame or get more things. Now the men that I surround myself with want to lead the world into, I guess, a better, more stable way of being.
Yeah. It's great, man.
Yeah, it's awesome.
How do we scale this up?
Yeah. We've talked about it, because it's not fair. It's like, how can you be rich if you can't be rich unless your neighbors are rich. You can't be fully divine masculine if your neighbors aren't. We have to do this on mass, like at scale. And there's not one size fits all, but I would encourage everybody to seek groups, seek local groups that meet in person, to wrestle with this, because there's not one formula, but it's just showing up. And that's the most important lesson that I've learned from my men's groups. There's not one thing you're supposed to learn except just to show up.
Yeah.
Don't retreat. Don't dip, because all of us in the group have, and we've all shared this, that we all have imposter syndrome. Like, why do I belong here? This sense of belonging, like, oh, all these men are amazing. Who am I to be here with these incredible humans? And they all feel the same way. And everybody is wrestling with the self-doubt or the insecurity. And so we just remind ourselves, just keep showing up, just keep being vulnerable and keep opening yourself, because when you do, it helps the group and we help each other. So I would just say to you out there, if you are seeking more, you want more from life, and you want to improve yourself, and as Krishnamurti says, transform the individual, and go find others and do that together. But all you really have to do is just show up.
And be honest. That's the big piece. And I think a lot of men, really struggle with the ability to, summon the courage to be vulnerable, especially amongst other men. But by creating a safe space in order for that to be communicated, I think the benefits of that, can't be overstated. I mean, this is something I learned, immediately in 12-step. And I, of course, get a lot of that out of men's groups that I go to in that context, but I also have another men's group that I meet with once a week, and it's like 7 guys. It's mediated by a therapist. Been doing it for coming up on 3 years now.
Nice.
And it's just been unbelievable. And that's not an addiction-based one. That's just, we get together. Here's what's going on with me, what's going on with you.
Yep.
We mutually support each other. And now we know each other so well that we know everybody's blind spots, or we've seen the patterns. Like, you keep doing this thing and you say you're not going to do it, and then you've done it again, or we give the feedback and the person doesn't take the feedback, and then we have to deal with the problem and the aftermath of it. And it's just been amazing, and it's something that I think, again, to like look to camera, like if you're out there, this is something you can do in your own community with your friends.
Yeah.
Maybe you get a therapist involved or somebody else who has some level of expertise, but if you don't have access to that, there's nothing stopping you from getting a group of dudes together to just talk in a safe space where it's like, this is confidential.
Right. But the intention is different than like getting together with your friends and going out to a bar.
Of course.
Or getting with your friends and going out and like, four-wheeling.
No,
like,
we're not going to watch the game, and it's not
Right.
activity based.
Right.
Like this is very focused.
Right. And that is maybe the challenge because we haven't been taught how to do that
Right.
necessarily, So I guess maybe not to oversimplify. It's like, oh, just so easy, just go do it. But, I guess it's important to just note that it's getting together with other men, specifically men, and sitting in an allotted time in a safe space where you communicate vulnerably and it's very confidential so that you can start to open up some of the deeper layers of what's going on inside that, get pushed down because of the daily grind or because of, life that
Right.
Takes precedent.
Right. So how have you calibrated the growth for yourself? Like when you think about what's important to you now versus then, can you gauge that with some level of objectivity?
I'm in such a good place now. I don't, dare I say, I'm not in an overt growth period. I'm more in now, let me take what I've learned and start applying it in my life. So that's what I'm doing. I spent the past 2.5 years in with a lot of challenge and struggle and learning and growth and shedding and rethinking everything. And now, based on what I've learned, I can go out and start to do, to build, to create. So it's a really, really exciting time for me. And I decided to express that by buying land in Texas and building a community and doing a lot of the things that I would tell other people to do. Get in touch with nature, connect with the land, and grow your own food. And
You're living in Brooklyn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and it's I feel great, and I'm starting to learn some of the skills that I think my spirit craved. Building, carpentry. I used to be so. I didn't want to be dirty. It was like didn't like bugs and nature was scary, and now I'm like dancing with it, and it's opened up a whole aspect of myself that is just so it's grounding. It's grounding is what it is.
And
it's stable.
It's you're in a healthy relationship. You've got this farm. You're growing food. You got your permaculture certification.
I
right?
got my permaculture certification. Yeah,
and that kind of thing of having your hands in the dirt is the microcosm of the macrocosm conversation about how can we live more in alignment with nature. How can we create greater harmony, not just with respect to the relationship with the land and the foods that we eat, but how we think about and practice commerce and how we live our professional lives and how we navigate relationships. Like everything is a dance, and it's all about like moving towards greater symbiosis.
Yeah. And I get to express my unique perspective of what that looks like in my little world, right? And I get to be a laboratory for what's possible. And I think we all need to, on some level, experiment with new ways of being in community and new ways of exchanging value that aren't what we're told. It's not all about the stock market or dollars and currency. Sometimes, there are other ways that we can really start to support each other. It's not all just pursuing the American dream, which I think it's pretty much all but debunked at this point, right? So this has been really exciting. Right now, we're looking to invite people to live with us as well on the land. We have plenty of space to have a few people building on that particular property, and so we're exploring all the different ways that we can structure the agreement amongst people on how to live and share space and share effort and contribute so that we can be additive, not extractive from nature itself. So nature focused, nature centered, and nature being a shareholder, within the community.
It's inspirational, but I also like the kind of knee jerk that I have in my mind is we've been trying to figure this out for a long time. Every time there's some communal experiment, personalities get involved and it ends up imploding. Sure. It turns into, wild, wild country or some version of that, Right, yeah. And so how do you avoid those pitfalls? Like what can be learned from other experiments in alternative living arrangements to find a new perfected way of doing it that is harmonious?
And I think that's exactly the right questioning. That's the right line of questioning because it hasn't worked, right? Or maybe the ones that have worked, we just don't hear about because they're working. It's always the ones that collapse and are have some sensational cult leader and a bunch of Kool-Aid that we hear about, right? So those stories strike the imagination. Our imagination, and they're fear-based, right? I mean, Charles Manson or, Jim Jones. That's what you think of when you think commune. Yeah, obviously disaster, right? Branch Davidian, like all the ones. So,
or scaled up communism.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly, yeah. So that's why I believe that we need to double down and do it more to try and solve for some of those pitfalls that they fell into. So that's something that I've been considering as well as, how do you create it so that there's not one cult of personality, there's like one ego bankrolling the whole thing. So initially I was like, well, I'll just bankroll the whole thing and then everybody can come and, do a barn raising,
right?
And dress like Amish or something, you know. That's bullshit, right?
And you're the landed gentry.
Yeah.
And you have serfs.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, that's not going to work because now it's still my operation. I'm the one who bankrolled it. And there's a subconscious, if not overt, sense of me being
there's a power dynamic.
Exactly, power dynamic. So one thing I've been exploring is, and this is all open, like we haven't defined it at all, but what about, taking the profit motive, taking the money out of the equation, right? So create a land trust. You basically put the land into a trust and the land becomes at the top of the hierarchy. So we all work for the land.
In service of the land,
Exactly. We all work to steward the natural environment to be, the most bountiful and beautiful it can be. And so anyone who lives there agrees to put their focus and life force into that. And also, I've been exploring, alternative currencies like Bitcoin and
that's right. You called me when you were in Miami at the big Bitcoin conference.
Yeah, using those kinds of technologies to create a hyper-local currency, which is fully transparent. So when people are living there, I'm not trying to exploit you because I was a first mover on this piece of land and now I get to live pretty well. You're working your ass off to pay me, premium. Again, back to the can't be rich unless your neighbors are rich. Like, no, like I don't want to make money off you. I want to work with you to serve the land. So if you have full transparency, then everybody knows what everything costs, what you paid for what, and there's no subterfuge or exploitation of through the ignorance.
Right. Yeah, that transparency I feel like could solve a lot of those problems.
Yeah,
where everybody's on a level playing field and they can see exactly what's going on.
Right, and on a small scale, I feel like you can really do that well. The minute it gets big and you have, tentacles of a machine or a system that you don't have eyes on, it becomes more difficult to
right.
Yeah,
but you got to start somewhere.
Well,
And I think the
we should-
blockchain and cryptocurrency and social contracts and all of that provide this unprecedented opportunity to play out experiments in a way that we've never been able to do before.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're in a great renaissance of opportunity for people to experiment and try things. And I think it's a positive thing if we do innovate, not just in business, but also in ways of communing with other people, because as our traditional institutions start to break down, or maybe they're not as effective as they could be, or they're not protecting the environment, or they're not protecting poor people, marginalized communities, we need to step up, take personal responsibility, and do it.
Self-sufficiency becomes a premium.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's no better way to health than to take responsibility for where your food comes from and what you're putting into your body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I saw a cartoon or like a meme the other day, and it was a caricature of a guy talking to an animal, and he was like, I'm so much smarter than you. You just have this small brain. And the animal looked at him and said, "You're the only animal that pays to live here." I was like,
that's so funny.
I never really thought about that.
Yeah.
Think about that. So when you make the land, the land is the boss here. You're completely shifting perspective. Like it's a whole different lens on the whole thing. And what if we all, it's obviously that's rooted in ancient traditions.
So
you're like 8% Native American, right?
12,
Something
I think.
like that.
12%. Just under tax.
Of what
tax
tradition?
write-off.
Just underneath that.
Yeah. Well, and borrowing from all those traditional traditions. So because it's not defined as of yet, we get to explore building our own unique little system, borrowing from the wisdoms of our old traditions, and also new philosophies, new ideas, new technologies. That's really exciting to me, and we can just see if it works.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't devolve into some sort of weird cult,
right?
We'll be. Keep me honest, okay?
Right,
Keep me honest. Yeah.
I think you're tiptoeing into cult leader
Right.
status.
I mean, look,
right
I'm wearing
now.
the white pants.
Yeah, I know. You're halfway there. You got like a nice thing around your neck.
Yeah.
You could dial you up into that.
Right. A found antler.
Right.
So
get you and Russell Brand and Jared Leto together, and something could come out of that.
Oh, that was low, man. That was low.
No, but all three of you beautiful men, expressing themselves in interesting ways right now.
That's funny.
But all leaders of alternative ways of thinking and being, I think, in your own rights.
Yes.
Yeah. That's all I wanted to say.
So you're in?
Yeah, I'm in.
Okay.
I want to come and spend some time on the farm.
Yeah, come on out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to be in Austin, I think, in the fall or the winter. So I'll let you know. But I think it's cool. It's exciting. And I think it's cool that you're seeking out, like when you're with DuContra, when you're looking at a prospective investment and you're trying to establish like the level of impact or innovation that a certain company, has the potential to be, like, what does that look like? Like, how do you make that decision of getting involved?
Yeah. So we have 4 verticals that we use to make decisions about who we invest in. And they're all reflective of the conversation we've been having. What we believe is like a winning combination of things that we need to invest in and support in order to make a better society. And that's about, better humans. So better humans make better decisions, they make better businesses, they make a better world. So we have a vertical called human flourishing. So tools, technologies, medicines that help level up the human being. Mm-hmm. So health, wellness, mental health.
Plant medicine's a big part of it, right?
Exactly. Tools both new and ancient that will help level people up. That's one vertical. So community, communitas, like companies that are seeking to solve for some of the the disconnect that we have in our society, the fractured communities. So how do we bring people together in really important and meaningful ways so that they can do the work to build a better future? What we consume and how. So consumer goods, we call it do consumer. So better for the planet, better for you, stuff that we buy, how we consume it, supply chain, materials, health and wellness, what's the ingredients and stuff. So that's a consumer vertical. And then finally, looking at money itself. So the future of finance, rethinking money and how we use it, and investing in tools and devices and systems that bring more equity and more access to the world's wealth. And, of course, blockchain technologies, Bitcoin, that sort of thing is like right up there in terms of the types of technologies that we think will actually be disruptive in a positive way.
Yeah. How do you reconcile the environmental footprint of crypto right now with, your environmental work and sensibility? Obviously, there's work to be done here to kind of figure that part of the equation out.
Yeah, so, maybe it's something that people haven't really truly fully recognized about me, but I've been a moderate environmentalist for a long time, for potentially for my entire career as an environmentalist. I don't look for one size fits all absolute panaceas to solve the entire world, all the environmental problems. There are trade-offs to everything that we do. And so I think we together need to start to create systems that, first of all, recognize what those trade-offs are honest about them, and then start to create systems that are better for people, better for the planet. But I don't imagine that there's a moment in time in which our footprint becomes zero.
Sure.
Our footprint is always going to at least be greater than zero because we are here, because we do create waste. But how can we create closed loop systems, and how can we create ways to help be regenerative about how we live and breathe, and how we, tread lightly on the planet? So with regards to Bitcoin, it's a new technology, and yes, it does have environmental challenges because of its energy consumption. But I think the net benefit of the technology to society overall is going to be a positive, because while there may be some environmental challenges currently, that's going to ultimately get better and better,
right? Because
the incentive is for miners and Bitcoin as an industry to find cheaper and less energy intensive ways of mining. And then at a certain point, it'll cap out because you can't mine anymore. So then it'll drop to essentially zero. But ultimately, the technology will help to spawn innovations and support entrepreneurs and different new technologies that will actually better the world ultimately across all sectors, including energy. So I think taking currencies away from a centralized place and bringing it to as many people as possible will actually create a lot more benefit for society at large and the environment.
Yeah. It's pretty fascinating. I admit to knowing close to nothing about it, but I feel like from what I do know, blockchain technology just holds unbelievable potential to change our world in ways we can't even fathom right now. The most obvious being like the transparency that comes with it, the efficiencies that can be established with it that will inherently reduce consumption and waste and things like that. But I feel like we've barely even begun to comprehend what that technology is gonna bring to all of us.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about it on like a small scale at Kintsugi on the ranch. If there's transparency, you can't exploit your neighbors, right?
Right.
You can't mark it up higher. But when there's so much murky transparency that suddenly
And create whatever story you want to create that serves your agenda.
Right. And you overpay for things and you underdeliver, and then all money, all finances are flowing through a centralized system that are taking pieces without adding value. So it's just highly inefficient and allows for a lot of exploitation. And when you have one-to-one direct exchange of value where it's fully transparent, it's going to be so much, I think, more productive in the long run for industry, for business, for just the way we interact and share value.
Yeah. What's going on with the environmental work that you're doing? You were at a beach cleanup yesterday, and I saw the video that you made about detergent pods, which I didn't know.
Oh, I know.
I just assumed that dissolves and that was figured out.
Yeah.
So explain that a little bit.
So trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
I've been playing in the world of trade-offs ever since I've been doing environmental work, because you recognize that, even environmentalists are flying around the world to try and save the world and burning fossil fuels, So we got to give ourselves a break and allow ourselves to think a little bit more open-minded about, what solution really means. Is it about, we are now saved and solved, or is it about deepening our relationship to the way in which we consume, the way in which we show up, and just be more in touch with what those externalities look like, and then own that you've done something that has a detriment and maybe correct for it. But these pods, I believed, like you, I was like, solution, because they dissolve and you can't see them. To the naked eye, the environment is safe. But on a microscopic level, it's just plastic that's become melted and then dissolved into water. So it's like a plastic goop in your laundry that then goes directly into the waste stream and into the oceans ultimately, or through your water treatment plant, which doesn't have the technology to actually address that particular substance.
That.
Right.
And it doesn't break down.
Right. And the biggest...
It should be illegal. That's crazy.
Right. And now we're getting into like centralized government. Like, should centralized government come in and tell you all the stuff that you need to do, Or can we together open our eyes and start recognizing that, a lot of these companies are, they're greenwashing, or at least they're, they're seducing us into a false sense of security when there are better solutions. And that's one thing at DuControl, what we're doing. We're really doing a deep dive. We're not just investing in, it says it's green and it seems green and we're going to invest in it so we feel good about it and we project an air of impact. No, we're actually looking at the realities of what those trade-offs are and recognizing, hey, we're going to invest in this, even though it's not a perfect solution, but we see it as a step towards a better solution, or it's a better trade-off than the one we have. So we take our deep dives very seriously before we invest. And when we found Blue Land, it was, a great solution to these pod problems. And I didn't know myself that these plastic pods were actually plastic. And so Blue Land came along and was like, much better solution. Yes.
So they're a detergent company that's figured that out?
Yeah, so they do cleaning products, home cleaning products. So they do soaps and detergents and all natural ingredients and no plastic, zero plastic. They just sell, basically, I heard something that was like kind of like an Altoid for your laundry. It's like a little compressed tablet that you throw into your laundry, or then you throw one of those compressed tablets into a reusable jar for hand soap, or all-purpose cleaners and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. The greenwashing thing is out of control, and layer on top of that the fact that we live in a post-fact world and a culture that isn't just so resistant to embracing nuance. Like you're talking about the trade-offs, like everything has trade-offs. And that's true in the environmental movement. That's true in politics. That's true in everything. But we're now in this culture where everything is binary, bad, good, right, wrong, et cetera. Anybody who's tried to, engineer a product and do it in a sustainable, conscious way understands how complicated it quickly gets. Like, well, we could use this ingredient, which is better than this one, but it comes from Vietnam. And so we're going to have to ship it from there. And this box is not plastic, it's cardboard, but it's going to cost more. Or it uses this dye, which isn't great. It just quickly becomes, a thing where you're chasing your tail.
Right.
And if you want to do it so that it's of the most pristine, it's going to be priced out of the market and no one will buy it and you'll go out of business. Right. And that's the reality.
Right. It's like everybody wants the purest, most environmentally friendly product, but no one will pay for it.
Right.
Just like everybody.
And then you're an elitist asshole who's part of the problem because it's only available to the elite.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it's like our media diet too. Everybody wants news that's like has solid information with, news people that are,
as long as it lines up with your bias.
Well, no, but I'm just saying that they don't want to pay for it. Right?
Oh, right.
So we let commercials pay for it, and then commercials drive the content.
Right. Exactly.
Because if you want to actually
I feel like
pay,
that's changing a little bit. Like you're seeing with Substack and everything that's going on, like people are finding ways to do subscription services.
Yeah.
But it's serving to also like bifurcate the market so much. Like, how many Substacks are you going to subscribe to?
Well, I think our society is just breaking down into smaller, more manageable pieces. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
No, I mean, there is no monoculture anymore.
Yeah.
And is that good or bad? I don't know.
Yeah. Right. Like this whole, the globalization concept that we're all going to be one big, same governing body.
No,
just
we're all
feel
planets
right.
unto ourselves.
Yeah.
That's where it's headed.
Yeah.
The idea of a television show that would reach as many people as Entourage is almost impossible.
Oh yeah.
These days.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's good.
I think it's good.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you argue with evolution? I mean, it's doing its thing and we're part of it, and get on board.
Yeah. Is it evolution or is it devolution?
Well, it's
sometimes
both.
I'm not sure.
It's both. It's expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting, breaking apart, rebuilding.
Are you optimistic?
I am. I'm very optimistic.
So explain that to me.
Well, because I've let go of the ego part of me that thinks I know the way the world should be, and surrendered to the playfulness and the joy of just being a part of this existence. We're alive. How can you not be optimistic? We're here. It's incredible.
I'm just going to let that sit for a minute. I appreciate that. I find myself vacillating between being inspired and being despondent with what I see. And a lot of that is fueled by me opening up my phone and scrolling through a bunch of stuff and seeing, some street in Germany where cars are getting, pushed down the road in a massive flood. And I just think like, we're never going to figure this out.
Oh, wait, did you think you were going to live forever?
No.
Oh.
But meaning, as a parent also, it changes when you're a parent because you think about the world that your kids are inheriting.
Well, I do think we live forever. Maybe that's the difference. I believe that life is infinite and ever transmuting and changing and transforming. It's not ever the way you think it's going to be. Even if you have the best projections and the best predictions about what tomorrow is going to look like, it's always going to be a little bit different, right? So I think let go with a healthy amount of ease your expectations. And so I live my everyday, not for how I imagine this world in my lifetime is going to be, but more for how I believe like future generations should be living. And I believe that's
back to Krishnamurti.
Yes.
The idea of being the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual embodiment of the person who's carrying a certain resonance that you would like the world to embody.
Yes.
It's really the only path forward. I mean, that has roots in Zen also.
Yes.
The way to change the world is to change yourself.
Yes. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, cool.
No, I'm completely on that page. I'm completely on that page. When you're talking about we live forever, is that
life
about consciousness?
Life continues.
Life continues, certainly, but does your consciousness is transmuted into something else?
Yeah, I mean,
the oneness of consciousness, your portion of that oneness, then will find its way into some other expression.
We crave the continuity of self. Like, I'm the same person I was yesterday that I am today, and now you trust me because you can rely on me being me.
But that's a very limited. That predisposes that anything is static ever.
Exactly, which it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And if you expand out to a larger timeline, you realize, oh, you've been changing every single
mm-hmm.
moment. And you're not the same person you were last year, certainly not the same person you were at 8. But I can also talk. I can communicate through time and space by connecting in with my inner child, who I know so well. And he actually speaks to me and gives me lots of wisdom and shares with me the things that help me be a better man, a better father for, not my inner child, but for my future children.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe there is continuity in being able to actually connect into multiple timelines,
mm-hmm.
not just your past within yourself, but also if you close your eyes, like how you imagine you want to be and where you orient your life so that you can embody and be in the embodied expression of that future potential, and then let go of it because you're part of a much more complex
right.
system.
Well, we could go down a
crazy
rabbit hole with this, because ultimately, time is a mental construct, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of moving through time or speaking to your inner child or communicating with your future self on some level, these things are all existing simultaneously,
mm-hmm.
are they not? Right? And so when that inner child is percolating up, what is it saying to you? What is he saying to you?
Yeah.
Is he expressing his needs or telling you it's going to be okay? Or what does that exchange look like?
Yeah, I think right now he's saying, don't be a douchebag, like make the sacrifices to be there for your kids so that
mm-hmm.
they have a little bit easier time than you did.
Right.
So it's a lesson really of presence.
Be the present dad that you didn't have.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so kids are going to be a thing for you.
Right. And yeah, 100%. Yeah. Be the role model that I wish I'd had.
Mm-hmm. When you look back on this arc, do you have regrets or wish that you had done things differently? Or, I'm sure people say, what's the advice you would give yourself? I get that question a lot. I never know how to answer it because everything is unfolded perfectly.
Yeah, exactly.
And all the pain that I've experienced and, the difficult times that I've had to, weather have all crafted the person that I get to be today. And I would never want to shortcut myself from that.
Well, it's also the devil that right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd much rather take the existence that I've already experienced and I've already gone through and okay, I'll take this because it could be worse.
Yeah. And are you completely done with acting, or what's your relationship with the craft?
I just changed my relationship to what kind of roles I take. And, I'm not acting for money. In other words, I'm not just taking jobs because they're going to pay me a good amount of money. It's more if the role resonates with me.
If some crazy, awesome role falls into your lap with an unbelievable director.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
David Fincher, I'll do
there's
it.
still a tether, like maybe a thread to Hollywood.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I and I'm also, as I mentioned, I'm getting back into the storytelling, like how I'm going to show up in that in that capacity. And it's not all Hollywood and movies, but also I have a lot to say in documentary form and short form. And so podcast or docuseries, I plan on doing a lot of that stuff as well.
Right. Do you have any projects you're thinking about that you're willing to share about?
Yeah, so this is a little bit premature, but I'll share it. I've been slowly building a channel, which I call Earth Speed, a lifestyle in the cadence of nature. And that's essentially going to be my channel for sharing stories from the land, just, what my trials, my challenges and my successes in building the community and learning how to farm, learning how to grow my own food, all of those things that I think should be open sourced and shared. Again, as I use my life as a laboratory or as an experiment for possibility, I want to be able to share that, open source it, so that not only I can get feedback, like, hey, don't do that, you dummy. It's so much easier if you do it this other way. But also, maybe other people might be inspired to try it themselves. And I think the more people start to experiment and explore growing food in their backyards, in their front yards, do away with the front lawn, make some food. I think we're going to have to share wisdom in that.
Yeah. So you've been documenting that all along.
Yeah, here and there.
Yeah, that's cool. Are you connected to Zach Bush, Dr. Zach Bush, and Farmer's Footprint?
Not directly, but I listen to him often.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good friend. I mean, that's the first thing I thought of.
I'd love to.
You should sync up with him.
Please, yeah.
Because all the work that he's doing in that very space with regenerative farming and permaculture.
Where is he?
Where is he?
Yeah.
He's been living in Hawaii mostly, but he's got a place in Encinitas as well. And Farmer's Footprint is located in Encinitas.
Yeah.
But they're, I'm close with them. I can make that connection easily.
I would love that. I really think the future, at least in the way I see it, will be absolutely decentralized, but you'll have little pockets of sanity, little islands of cohesion, all interfacing, connected, but autonomous. And that's what we're looking to contribute to, is that vision, is our land will be its own standalone system, but we'll have a lot of back and forth and exchange of ideas with other communities and other farms and other operations around the world.
Yeah, I think it's just like anything else. You have to start in one place, prove that it's possible before you can, tackle the larger problem, and then share the process of how that was built to then, create scalable solutions. Because we're looking at a food system right now that's so broken, that's so deleterious environmentally, that creates all kinds of food injustice and a battery of problems that are making us sick and depleting the planet. And truly, the only way forward is to find new, regenerative, scalable, sustainable solutions. So as consumers, yes, we can use our front lawns and do all of that. But those are really just pilot projects for how to create an environmental model and an economic model for the modern day farmer that will incentivize them to make that switch and get out of their, big ag, paradigm to create food that is actually going to be able to feed the planet.
Yeah. I would just push back a little bit on the expectation of scalability. And I think it's this weird thing that we all believe that scalable solutions are the right solutions, or a business that can scale is the best business that we can have. There's something that you lose when things scale. And as I was saying, once a system grows to the point where the tentacles are so long that you can't keep track, it starts to become inefficient, and often the externalities and the destructiveness can sort of get away from you.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we need scalable solutions. I think we need 8 billion localized solutions within each individual that doesn't scale, but is like very unique and specific to where that person is or where that community is. So I think it's not just a consumer solution to grow food in your front yard. It's actually a environment-wide solution with if everybody takes responsibility for their own little patch of land and we stop farming out, no pun intended, our farm industry or our agriculture industry to these big scaled businesses that can't really take care of the environment, because once you have a certain number of animals on a feedlot, the system collapses because you need diversity within each of those systems. So it has to be small and it has to be localized and individualized, I believe.
Yeah, no, that's a point well taken. I guess part of where that comes from for me is, somebody who's been, I've been plant-based for 15 years, but I'm under no illusion that the entire world is going to get struck plant-based. Like there's, it's always going to be, a smaller percentage of the population. And likewise, not everybody is going to start planting food in their front yard. There's just a large percentage of the population that either live in urban places or it's not accessible for them or they're working 3 jobs. But perhaps, to your point, there can at least be these community hubs in every community, right? And you localize the whole thing.
Right.
And it's sort of community owned and operated in a way that creates a brand new paradigm that does reconnect the members of that community who don't have the wherewithal to like plant in their front yard or whatever to participate in that.
Or instead of the, local Forever 21, you have vertical farming in that, that building.
Yeah. It's crazy. I was in New York City the other week and I did, and I love New York. Like I have so much fun going back there. I mean, I didn't grow up there, but I get such a boost of like energy when I'm there. And I did a podcast with Eric Adams, who's most likely going to be the next mayor. And he's got a huge food initiative. He had a crazy health story that's made him very interested and invested in shifting the city's relationship with nutrition in schools and hospitals, et cetera. And I said to him, like, every rooftop in this city should have a garden. Like, and he's like, I'm all about it. Like, to the extent that a politician within that framework can motivate that kind of change, I'm not sanguine about, but just to have the conversation about the possibility of that, every urban environment should make use of vacant lots and rooftops and vertical gardening. Like there is a crazy viable future if we can marshal the political will and the resources to make those things happen. And I think most people want that.
Do they?
I don't know. See, I thought you were the optimist.
Well, no, I am the optimist. I just think that people still believe in the old paradigm. They're still attached to this.
But you have to show them. You have to show them the way. This is where the cult leader thing comes in. You still need the personality, right? You got the white pants.
Okay, fine, I'll do it.
You're halfway there.
Fine. You talked me into it.
Take us across the goal line, Adrian. Cool, man. Well, I think that's a good place to land this plane for today.
Awesome.
How do you feel?
Feel great. Yeah. I'm glad that we got to do this.
Yeah. Me too, man. I think it's really inspiring what you're doing and impressive that you've made this life pivot and decided to put these values that you have to work and in the forefront of the advocacy. And I know you're in a gestation period, but like all artists, you have to live your life before you can create expression out of those experiences. And I have no doubt that at the appropriate time, you will bring expression to that. And I think that will be impactful to many. So I wish you luck. I wish you well, and I'm at your service.
Oh, thanks, my friend. I appreciate it.
Cool. So if people want to learn more about what you're up to, Do Contra, Lonely Whale, all the stuff, where's the best place to direct them? So
DoContra.ventures, and we're actively seeking investment. So if you want to invest in what we're doing and take a look at the model, reach out to us, email us. So the website is DoContra.ventures. And then, of course, Lonely Whales, my ocean conservation organization, lonelywhale.org. We have a number of really great projects and campaigns, including Ocean Heroes Boot Camp, my favorite, where we host 300 youngsters from 30 different countries around the world to do ocean work.
It's cool.
Yeah, I'll just leave it at those two for now.
All right. And at Adrian.
At Adrian
In all the places.
Yes, on Insta.
Cool, man. Well, hopefully you'll come back and talk to me again, man. I really enjoyed this.
Let's do it. Next time we'll record at the ranch.
Yeah. That would be good. I'm into that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. It's a date. And I'll expect you to be wearing full white at that point. All right?
I will.
Cool.
Feathers.
Peace.
Bye.
Plants.